Hey everyone, my name is Masai and today I'm going to explain to you guys why n8n is probably the best automation platform to use for your law firm. So automations are extremely powerful. AI obviously is going to be extremely impactful in the legal field, and we need a platform that gives us maximum capability to work with automations, but also with artificial intelligence as well. Because that's the entire thing, right? Is we want to fulfill the promise of AI, which is actually getting real work for you done in your law firm, right? Not just summarizing something that doesn't need to be summarized or creating a podcast with Notebook LM that doesn't really help you do work, right? We need to build automations that are going to help you actually get work done. And we need to have AI throughout those automations. We need to be able to handle both of those things together. If you don't know me, my name is Masai Andrews, and I help small law firms to build automations and integrate AI as well. So let's get into n8n. So n8n, we're going to get into it. I'm going to try to show you everything that you can do on this platform, all the capabilities, and explain to you why this is the best platform to build workflows, automations, and also to do any sort of work with AI that you're thinking about in your firm. So we'll start off just talking a little bit about what n8n is and what you can do with it. It's an open source workflow builder, meaning that you can run it wherever you want. If you want to run it on Microsoft servers, you can run it there. If you want to run it on AWS servers, you can run it there. On DigitalOcean, you can run it on any cloud provider that you want to. You can host it on your own servers. It gives you that complete flexibility. It also gives you the flexibility to write code. So you can build normal workflows without any code, like stuff like this, but you can also write code if you want to or need to for certain actions. And then the core components are the following components that we're going to go over now, are the ability to create executions and schedule executions. So you can determine how different workflows are started and when they're started and what causes them to start. APIs and integrations, so connecting with outside platforms. We'll get into that later. Then you have the ability to run code, to transform and manipulate data. You have conditional logic. You have the ability to work with AI in different ways with agents, LLM chains, and then also native nodes. And then you have user input interaction, and then you also have modularity and data tables. So we're going to get into all this stuff. We're going to start with execution and scheduling control. What is a workflow? How do we start a workflow? How do we control when workflows run, right? So the most basic way to start a workflow is this manual trigger button here, which is it just looks like it's a mouse basically, right? And what happens is whenever we run this workflow, whenever we click this manual trigger, it's going to run the workflow. So it's a manual click to start the workflow. And what I'm going to show you here is these sheets. So if I open up this sheet, I have a sheet here with some names and some emails in them. And then I take those values from that sheet and I draft emails to those people using the values that are in that sheet. And what I'm going to do is to run this workflow, I'm going to select the when clicking execute workflow button, and then I'll click it and then I'll execute the workflow and we'll create 3 drafts in my Gmail. So if I come to my Gmail, I can refresh here and see that I should have 3 drafts that have been written automatically from that workflow, right? So that's one way to run a workflow. And this is good for if you want to do something one time, but en masse, right? You have 1,000 emails you want to draft or 100 emails you want to draft or whatever you want to do. And you want to do that all at scale and en masse and prepare that, without having to do stuff manually. So that's a manual trigger, but there are a few other triggers. So we have the schedule trigger here. If I wanted to send these emails, let's say every 30 minutes or every day or every week or something, you can open up the schedule trigger. You can select the interval that you want the trigger to run on. So every day, let's say, and then at the time that you want it to run, say 2 p.m. every day. Then I could connect this to the workflow. And if I connect this here, it's going to create those drafts every day at 2 p.m. So that's the schedule trigger, manual trigger. And the other triggers we have are form submission, webhooks, and then triggers from different platforms. So form submission just gives you the ability in n8n to create forms. So if I open this up, I have a really basic form here that I've created with a name and an email value and a text value. So what I can show you here is, first I'll go into Gmail and delete those drafts. Select these, discard these drafts. Then I'll connect my form submission to my workflow, save this, and then open up the form And I have names here. So let's say Jim Doe, and then jim@gmail.com. And then my message is, hey, Jim, let's say, right? Submit that. Then as soon as this form is submitted, my workflow is going to trigger, and this data is coming into my workflow. Then from here, we don't really need the Google Sheets node here. We'd be able to just go straight to drafting emails, and I would just change the message to the message here. And then from here, if I let this run, it would automatically create the draft of the email. So this is for anything that you want to trigger on a specific form. If you need somebody to just fill a form out, and then you're going to do some actions afterwards, after they filled out that form, then you use the form submission node. So again, if I come back here and I refresh this, I'll see the draft of the message to Jim. So that's the form submission stuff. And then on top of that, we have a couple more to talk about. So the other two triggers that you have are, or three triggers, I should say, actually. Well, the other two main triggers that you have are the ability to trigger things from outside platforms. So let's say I wanted to run this workflow whenever a file was uploaded to a Google Drive folder. I can set this up to check a folder, and whenever a file is uploaded to that folder, then my workflow will run. So that's one thing I can do with that is Google Drive. And then I could also do something similar from Slack, where my workflow runs whenever I receive a message from a Slack channel, let's say. So that's how you would trigger things on actions in different platforms. And then if there was not a trigger set up from the platform, what you can do is you can use a webhook. So for example, this is a webhook that I set up to Airtable, where whenever I click this button, draft email, you see we have some different names we have some different emails in here. We have emails, we have subject lines, notes, etc., etc. And then whenever I click this draft email button, then this data goes to my webhook, and I could then connect my webhook to the later steps and run my workflow using the data from my webhook, let's say, right? So there's that. So that basically covers the main ways to trigger executions and to control the scheduling of those executions. From there, we have APIs and integrations. These are how we connect to other platforms. And so there's three main ways that you can connect to other platforms. You have apps that are supportive natively in n8n, meaning that when you come over to this plus button in the top right, and you come to action in an app, and you select this button here, these are all the applications that are already in n8n. So Documentero is one that will be relevant to you if you're a law firm. Dropbox, obviously, all the Microsoft stuff is going to be in here as well. Microsoft stuff, Google stuff is going to be in here. All of your main applications, your LLMs, OpenAI should be in here. OpenAI is going to be in here. Anthropic, I believe, should be. Anthropic should be in here. Gemini, Google Gemini. So these are all the different types of, all the different apps that are supported natively in n8n are here. But a lot of legal apps are not in n8n. So Clio, for example, is not here. My Case, for example, is not here. A lot of the legal apps are not here. And what you have to do in order to get access to those applications is use an HTTP request. And for HTTP request, all you do is search whatever application you want to use. So for example, Clio, and then come to documentation. And you'll search for that in Google, and you can open this up. And this will give you all the information that you need in order to configure your request. So for example, if I wanted to, let's say, automate the creating of a contact in Clio, I would just come down to the contact section, come to the section that says create a new contact, and I would just copy this data in here and follow the instructions on the documentation page to be able to create my contact in Clio. For the sake of this example video, I have an HTTP request to an API that gets cat images. But this is just to show you how an HTTP request works. And before I do that, I'll show you, for example, with something that's already natively integrated, like a Google Sheet, I would just come over to the plus button. I would grab a Google Sheets node, create a spreadsheet. I already have one here, but I'd create a spreadsheet, and I could add a title to the spreadsheet or whatever, and I could create a spreadsheet in Google. For an HTTP request, this is again how you'd access any platforms that are not available in the action in an app section, that are not natively in n8n. And you would just configure the request using the documentation. This is cat API. So now when I execute this, it will give me a URL for a cat image. And I should be able to also get that image and view it here. So now I have this lovely cat image that I got from the cat API, which is an outside platform. Obviously, you guys probably won't be generating cat images, but this is just how you connect n8n to outside platforms, right? And then the third way is an MCP trigger, meaning that you can connect, for example, Claude Desktop to your n8n workflows, and you can speak in natural language to Claude and tell it to go and execute workflows for you. So for example, if I hook this up, which is another node, which we'll talk about later, which is for executing sub workflows. We'll talk about that later though. But if I hook this up, then I can come into Claude. Hey, Claude, use the n8n tool to grab an image of a cat. And then it will go and it will use the tool in n8n, and it will grab my cat image for me, and it will give me my cat image here in Claude. So here's another cat image. And then there we go. We have another cat image here. So that's how you use MCP. But obviously, again, you guys won't be probably generating cat GIFs. You guys are doing more important stuff than that. But you could connect this to a workflow that does document review for you, that creates context for you, that generates certain types of motions and stuff like that. Once you've built those workflows out, you can start interacting with them in natural language using MCP and n8n, and you could just talk to Claude and get your workflows to actually do work for you, right? So that is the third way that you connect to outside platforms via MCP. Okay, so this is one of the most redeeming qualities of n8n is your ability to run code in here, which gives you flexibility to deal with a lot of different data types. We're going to run through a few different examples right now so you can see exactly what I mean. But the main and best use cases, in my opinion, are for extracting data, grouping data, and cleaning data. So for example, for extraction, let's imagine we have a bunch of case objects where we have the client coming in, the judge coming in, and the type of case coming in. And we want to figure out how many times each judge administered a case in our data set. Obviously, with a small data set, isn't that useful because there's only three objects in here. But when there's thousands and thousands of cases and you want to know how many times a judge ruled, or a judge was ruling in those cases in that data set, or you want to know what type of verdict they gave in those cases, and you want to know the exact number of how many verdicts they gave, this is where the code nodes are going to be extremely useful. So here we just have a few different cases with a few mock judges here. And then if we run the extraction, we can see that we get the final output, which tells us exactly how many cases each judge administered. So we have two from Judge Rodriguez and one from Judge Choi, for example. Then we also have grouping stuff. So here we have some data coming in where we have the case ID and the type of case. So again, the code stuff is really, really useful when we're dealing with large data sets with hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of records. And we need to process all that data. But here we have a case ID and the type of case. So family law cases, criminal cases, probate cases, and we're going to organize those and group them by the case type. So if we execute this here, we have this case types coming out, and then we actually run the code. Now we have groups here. We have the family. Let's see if we can. There we go. We have all the family cases here in one group, all the criminal cases in another group, and all the probate cases in another group. And this gets really useful for the next step that we're going to talk about down the line, which is performing different actions based on the different types. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then this one's a really common use case. So this is for cleaning data. Say, for example, this is one that happens a lot. Your voice over internet provider probably stores phone numbers differently than your AI note taker, for example, or in Clio or your case management system, you probably have people that are inputting phone numbers a lot of different ways. So some people might put +1, parentheses, phone number. Some people might just have the phone number with dots in between. Some people might have the phone number with no dots, no parentheses, nothing, right? And so a really good use case for code is just normalizing this. Let's get rid of all the ones and get rid of everything that's not a number so that we have only values of 10 numbers that we can use to then check if people are clients or not, check for even conflict checks potentially of matching phone numbers across different data sets is a really powerful use case of code. So if I run this step and we have all these different numbers here, and then I run the code step, we can then clean all those phone numbers. So we have just a normalized phone number at the end for all of these values. And again, this gets really, really useful when you're trying to clean hundreds or thousands of phone numbers at the same time. So That's what I think is super, super valuable about n8n, is that ability to run code and do things like that and have that flexibility in here. Then moving forward, we're going to talk about some conditional logic stuff. So we have two types of conditional logic nodes in n8n. We have your typical conditional logic, which is an if node, which means if something is true, go this way. If you can see, this is the true pathway. And if something is false, go this way. So here's another object where we have the estimated value of a case, right? Being $25,000. And you have the ID and all these other different data points. Say that, say you're doing estate planning or something, and you need to check whether the value of the estate exceeds a certain monetary value. And if it does exceed a certain monetary value, you want to go this way. And if it doesn't, you want to go this way. Well, that's what your if node is going to allow you to do. So if we run this here, in our if node, we're going to check whether, let's grab this estimated value here, whether the estimated value is greater than 20,000. Let's change this here also, is greater than 20,000 or not, right? And so because this value here is greater than 20,000, we'll output on the true branch. But say, for example, we set this to 200,000, for example, then obviously it's not greater than 200,000, it will go down the false branch. And also keep in mind that obviously all these workflows are going to run automatically once you set them up, and they're always going to check for these conditional checks, right? So that's the if node. And then the switch node is basically the if node on steroids. It allows you to check a lot of different types of conditions. And I'll give you a really quick example so you can get an idea of what that looks like. Say, for example, we're looking at a case and the practice area within this case object. And if the case is a probate case, we want to go down a certain pathway. Say if you guys are handling different types of cases, probate, criminal, family stuff, you probably have different workflows for those different types of cases, right? So being able to identify the type of case and then being able to execute a workflow depending on what the type of case is, it will be a really valuable use case. So if I run this here and then I check in the next step for the practice area type, which this practice area is probate, if I run this, it's going to come out of the probate branch, basically, because the practice area is probate. So it's just checking this practice area and checking whether it's probate. If it was family, it would come out the family branch. If it was criminal, it would come out the criminal branch. Or you could tell it what to do as a fallback. Basically, if it doesn't match any of these, you can give it a fallback, right, of what to do if it doesn't match any of these. So that pretty much handles conditional logic, flow control stuff. Now this is the sexy stuff, right? This is what everybody wants to talk about and everybody wants to be involved in, is AI stuff. And there are basically, this goes for no code automation. This also goes for like AI engineering, software development stuff. There's basically two main ways that you're going to interact with AI. And then there's another extra way that we have available to us in n8n. But the two main ways you're going to interact with AI is either through an LLM chain, and this goes for you building your own stuff, or even if you're working with an app or a software, right? They're either using an LLM chain or it's an AI agent. And a lot of people call LLM chains agents when they're not. We'll get into that a little bit. But an LLM chain is the normal thing that you're interacting with most of the time. It's where you have a chat model and you have the ability to send a query to that chat model. If I open the chat and I'll talk to this LLM chain, I can say, hello, how are you? And I'll send this over. My LLM chain will run and it'll respond to me. Hello, I'm doing well, thank you. How can I assist you today? So it's basically like talking to ChatGPT, but there's no extra functionality, right? Now, an AI agent has a few things. Typically, an AI agent has memory and it has tools. Memory just allows it to remember past conversations and continue learning based off of the conversations that it has. And then tools allow it to do things in the world, right? So you can give it a tool here to, let's say for Google Sheets, if we wanted to create a Google Sheet for us or to get information from a Google Sheet. We could also have an HTTP request tool. So now we could give it the ability to do things in Clio, in my case, and all these other platforms. You can give it a bunch of tools, basically. And tools just allow it to interact with the world. You can also give it tools to get information from databases. So vector stores and doing RAG and that type of stuff. You're able to do that in n8n with your AI agents. With this one, what I've done is the most useful use case, which is giving it access to our cat image tool. So our agent now has access to this cat image here, and I can ask it to generate a cat image for us. Whereas this LLM chain wouldn't be able to access this tool because it doesn't have tool use. It only has the model. But the AI agent here has access to the MCP tool that we created earlier, this MCP client, and it can trigger this workflow and it can get us an image of a cat. So if I come into this chat and say, if I clear this one and say, please use the n8n MCP tool to give me a cat image. Then this AI node will run, it will use the tool, it'll come back and it will give me the cat image. And you see, there we go. We have the image of the cat that is given me. Should I open this up so you guys can see? There we go. So I have the cat image here that's giving me back, right? The other LLM chain won't be able to do that because it doesn't have access to that tool. So that's the difference between an AI agent and an LLM chain. These are really powerful. You just have to know what you're doing and how to actually work with them. And then LLM chains have their place as well. Then the third way that we have in n8n to interact with AI is through native AI nodes. So if I come here to the plus button in the top right and I search for different model providers, OpenAI, for example, OpenAI has a bunch of different actions that you can do using the OpenAI APIs. You can create an assistant, you can send a message to a model, analyze an image, generate an image, transcribe recordings, translate recordings, that kind of stuff. Anthropic will have a bunch of those as well. And these are the different things that you can do using the APIs of the model provider. So that's another way that you can sort of interact with AI here. Say, for example, I wanted to, or this node in particular here is using OpenAI's Vision API, which creates, I think it's DALL-E actually. So this node in particular is using OpenAI's image generation model, which is DALL-E, I believe. And if I open this chat and send a message, say I refresh this, I can create a message. Let's say create a message of a cool guy on a keyboard using n8n on his computer and wearing sunglasses and a Rolex. We're going to go ahead and send that. But I'll send that over and then this will actually go and generate the image, right? So there's another way that we can interact with AI here, and it comes back and it should give us a nice, a pretty cool image at the end, hopefully. So I come here and open this, there we go. So you have a guy, he's on his keyboard, he has a nice watch, and I guess this is some version of n8n that he's using on his computer. So those are the three main ways you can interact with AI. You have an LLM chain, you have an AI agent, and you have the ability to use the AI nodes within n8n itself. Then in terms of getting input from users, we have a few things that we already covered. The webhook we talked about earlier, which is where you can connect things from outside platforms into n8n, like with the Airtable webhook that we talked about before, where we can get this data from Airtable, bring it into n8n. So that's one way that you can get user data into n8n. Then we have the forms as well that we talked about, where you can open up a form. And then, we can open up a form. This is an empty form right now. But we can get a form. You can send a form to somebody, have them fill out the form, and then the workflow executes when they fill out the form. And then we have what I was just doing, which is using this chat node, which you can just come here to the right and search for a chat trigger. And you have a chat trigger here, which triggers workflows when a chat message is received. And then there's this concept of human in the loop, which is useful. Human in the loop just means that you have people at some steps in processes, right? So here's another really good example. At some point in a process, you may want to check with a human being whether the process should continue or not. So a really good example is using a Slack node to send a message and wait for a response. And so if you have a workflow running and you want to send a message off to Slack, wait for the response from Slack. And then once the response is received, you can then resume the workflow again, right? So that's another really powerful use case. And that's the whole concept of human in the loop, is that somebody is there kind of keeping an eye on the workflow and determining when the workflow runs or doesn't run. And then we're going to talk quickly about modularity, which just gives you the ability to call other workflows within a workflow. So it's workflows within workflows. It's like, what is that? Alice in Wonderland or something like that. Anyways, we can call sub workflows from within a workflow. So say, for example, I wanted to execute this sub workflow from within my main workflow. So I have another workflow and I want to execute this workflow at some point I want to call this workflow from my other workflow. So what I can do is, or what I'll need is two things. I'll need this node here that says to call the workflow and also delineates which workflow to call. And then also within this workflow, I'm going to need to get rid of this. I'll need to use when executed by another workflow. So I'll need to have this in here. And then when this workflow is called by this other workflow, then this workflow will run, right? So you have that modularity capability as well, to where you can build out workflows within workflows that call each other. And then another thing, the last thing that we're going to talk about that's super valuable, super useful, is the data table. So if I come into n8n now, there is a new feature called data tables, which allows you to store data within n8n, which is super useful because you can get access to that data much more quickly and you can do actions with that data much more quickly. And this also adds on to n8n's self-hosted capability, because if you can host this, you can host n8n wherever you like, and you can have that data again stored wherever you like. But I'll give you a quick idea of how this works. So let's imagine that we have, open this up as an expression, open this all the way up. So imagine you have a bunch of case names, a bunch of case types, a bunch of practice areas, and a ton of these objects, right? And we want to put that into our database in n8n. What we can do is use a data table, which again is from, you can click the plus button, search for data table, grab it, and then we're going to select insert row, which is what we're going to be using here. Then what we can do is we can connect this data in here. So we can get this data coming out, all these different cases, and then we can insert this into our table. So we can grab the case name here, we can grab the case type, we can grab the practice area, and we can add all that stuff into our database. Ooh, actually, so here's what we'll have to do. Because this is an array with several different objects. So we have this array here, one array with a bunch of different objects in the array. What we have to do is split out these objects. So we split out, then we'll split out the cases array. And once we run this, this will then return 10 items, right? And we can take those 10 items and we can JSON dot case name dot case name. There we go. JSON dot case name, JSON dot case type, and then JSON dot practice area. There we go. So now once we split out all these different items, we have 10 different items, and we want to upload them all to our database. Now, when we come to our database and I refresh this, we're going to see all those different values coming in here. So we have all the different case names, case types, practice areas, they're all in here. And we can do a bunch of stuff from here. We can get rows that match certain conditions. So if, let's imagine we want to get all the rows that say case type are family. Let's say family. We want to get all the family cases. Execute this. Hold on, let me check what's even in here. Practice area, sorry. So let's get all the cases where the practice area is family. If I execute this step, I'm going to get a table with all the different cases that are family cases. And I can do the same for probate or whatever I wanted to. Or if I wanted to delete all the rows with family practice areas, I can do that. And I can even execute actions only if a row exists or doesn't exist. So let's say we only want to execute a workflow if the practice area is probate, let's say. If the row exists, then it will execute the workflow. If it doesn't exist, then it won't execute the workflow. So those data tables are extremely useful. So as always, the JSON for the workflow is going to be in the description of this video. And then I saw a lot of people actually went to the page last time and they didn't get the workflow. I promise you guys it's actually free. So you want to just come to this number here and just put 0 and put I want this. You guys don't have to pay anything. And then you put your email in here and it'll send you the JSON there, right? So there's not you guys can just put 0 for all this stuff and then click get and then you'll get it in your email. So I will link the JSON below this video in the description if you guys want to play around with the different capabilities of n8n. And again, it's there, it's completely free. So it's there for you guys. So if you're running a law firm, you probably have a lot of different technology products. You might have a voice over internet provider, case management system, a CRM, a bunch of different tech products in different places. And when you use an automation platform to start to connect these things together so they can actually talk to each other, it's like It's like Thanos, you know, in the Avengers with the last ring in the glove, basically, right? It brings everything together, and then you can snap, and then you can see a lot of ROI very quickly when you start to connect these things together. And then also when we start talking about AI and AI fulfilling its promise or its potential and its hype, a lot of it is going to come down to your ability to organize your information in these different systems and to give AI access to that information in these different systems. And so as much as things are changing, there's different products that come out and there's different models that upgrade. The ways that AI is able to interface with platforms, which is what's going to give you actual ROI from AI, is basically remaining pretty constant. You either work with APIs and tools or you work with MCP. And we would have just covered now in this video the way that you can work with both of those different protocols using n8n. So this is how we start using automations and AI to really amplify your workflow, right? If you're really great at what you do, AI can then help you to amplify that and to do that for more people and do it better and more quickly. And it can help you focus on what you're good at instead of just dealing with paper and documents all the time, right? But it's important that we actually have a place where we can start to connect things together and build out these workflows that are actually automating real work for you. If you do run a small law firm and you're looking to get some of these automations set up for you, there is a link you can click on in the description, and we can figure out how to get those set up. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like. There's actually a button for that, so leave a like if you liked it. Let me know if you like these types of videos or what other kinds of things you want to see, or if any questions were left unanswered, just let me know in the comments. And then also subscribe, turn on post notifications so you don't miss any more videos like these. Thanks for taking time to go through and actually watch this entire video, and I hope you guys have an amazing day.